Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. Hope you're enjoying your weekend, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Our first guest this morning is Kentucky Education and Workforce Development Cabinet Secretary Hal Heiner. You first came to know Heiner when he ran for governor in 2015. Now he's heading up a key part of the administration for the man who won the election that year, Governor Matt Bevin. This week, Secretary Heiner went before the Kentucky Board of Education to talk about a proposal to allow school students to attend the school of their choice. There would be conditions, and parents would have to arrange transportation if they went out of district. We'll talk with Secretary Heiner about that and what is his vision for future employment here in Kentucky and educational opportunities. How does the state get its workforce ready for the jobs of the future? Secretary Heiner joining us today, and we thank you very much for being here.
Bill, it's great to be here with you. Thanks for the invite.
Let's talk about this proposal on schools that basically appears to end residential requirements by district. What prompted you to promote this?
Well, Bill, we've always been looking for opportunities on how can we improve achievement in our education system, in our statewide system. And what's been happening around the country is there's 19 states now that have decided that typically a small percentage, but a percentage of their students benefit by having choices, more choice in what public school that they attend. So we've proposed for the Kentucky Board of Education to look into the idea of Kentucky going from a closed enrollment state to an open enrollment state. In the end, it may affect 3 or 4, some small percentage of students, with the home students obviously having priority, always having a seat. But if there are open seats, why not make that available to children that could benefit from that particular style of education?
Would you envision that in many cases it is students who are going to find a better program, a better opportunity? Maybe they're running from a social environment in the old school. How do you see that?
Well, certainly all of the above. But education today, just because of the much more complex world we live in, that's happened here over the last couple of decades, education is becoming, at the K-12 level, increasingly specialized. You'll see schools that have a real strong program in the STEM fields, or one school I know of has got the best biomedical science program I've ever seen in my life. Another school, they're expanding their diesel mechanics program, which we desperately need in Kentucky. We have very few programs in that area. We see another school that celebrates reading in a way at the elementary level that is not common across the state, and their students are really excelling. Another school where 90% of the students, when they graduate, have already completed some of their college courses in high school at no cost to them, and they're already on their way, and that happens to be a rural county. They're over 90%. So we're seeing differences and specializations across the state just because of the nature of work today, the economy we live in.
Would you envision students and their parents being able to make a very easy decision about this, and as long as they can find a way to get them to the new school outside their district, that could be done as easily as some paperwork?
Well, we're hoping that it's a seamless, from a parent standpoint, it's a seamless standpoint. Word travels fast within our state, just parent to parent, on different programs that are available, different specializations that are available. But the only time this would be open to someone outside the district is if there was a seat in the classroom, the teacher's already been hired, the school building lights have already been paid for, there's an open seat, there might be a class of say 20 seats and 2 seats are open, and that a parent says that school really fits the needs of my students much more closely to what they need right now, and that would be available to them.
But Mr. Secretary, wouldn't it benefit a school to sort of market to other students, and maybe that would be a catalyst to improve a particular program so that they would be able to lure students in from another district?
Well, that would certainly be an opportunity. What we've proposed, there's not tremendous benefit in that. We're thinking that possibly only the state and federal funding that might be about half the cost of running a school would travel with that student into that facility. So there would be the benefit in, I'll call it incremental income, filling out those last couple of seats in a school. I'm not sure you would expand the building if you're only receiving maybe half the money if the local funds didn't transfer. But I think it's an easy way to improve opportunities for parents to choose what's best for their child. I'll tell you one other situation. You know, a friend of ours, their child actually in middle school became the person picked on in the class. And they weren't too excited about that child moving with that same cohort, even though there wasn't anything physical that you could stop and say, don't do that. It was more emotional. And they were really looking for an opportunity for that child in our public school system. If we had an opportunity like this, that would allow that child, in that case, to possibly make a fresh start as they change schools.
So you're saying that this is much more about the individual student and their needs than it is creating some sort of competition between or among schools?
Well, I think not so much the competition, but I think it helps us specialize, and especially in the smaller districts. You know, we have 173 districts. Most are fairly small relative, compared to our very large cities. So as we move into specialization, where those schools need to be great in STEM fields and need to be great in arts fields, need to be great in a whole host of fields. It allows them to specialize, and maybe mobility for those students, that they can be the very best at the 2 or 3 areas they select, and adjacent county can be the very best at 2 or 3 areas, and allow greater mobility for those students.
How would this work with athletics? And I know that's a question that comes immediately because, obviously schools like to create powerhouses.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, it's interesting about athletics, because when this idea first mentioned this to a few people, that was the first question. Well, people are going to use this as a recruiting tool. And so, we'd have to have some safeguards. Certainly, our High School Athletics Association has some ways today to provide safeguards. A simple way might be that if the person transfers, they have to redshirt for the first year, or something that, there's an impediment from a recruiting standpoint. This isn't about athletics. This needs to be all about academic achievement and matching up a school's program with the needs of that student.
The proposal, as you see it, would be for district to district, not within district, right? If there is a large district, Jefferson County, Fayette County, for example, some of the others that have multiple high schools, it would not be among those schools that people could transfer.
Yeah, this is not a intra-district proposal. This would be just district to district. In those large districts, they've got a school board, and they, make those kind of decisions, and they're able to have specialization for the most part, right? They have magnet schools, all sorts of different learning environments. But I think this help is primarily would be primarily for rural districts in Kentucky that allow them to specialize and attract students that otherwise they couldn't fill out the class.
Would the state have an interest in governing what might be reasonable as far as transporting a student on a daily basis? I mean, if you lived in Corbin and wanted to go to school in Covington, that might not work out, right? It's a long trip.
Yeah. Typically, as you look around the country, the parents are responsible for transportation. Right now, the state only funds, I think, about 58% of the transportation costs. It's a burden already on districts, and we're not wanting this to be any kind of financial burden. So we're saying the parents would be responsible for transportation. It is interesting in these 19 other states what happens, though, if you have, a half a dozen students that might go to another district, that they set up an elaborate carpool system or some way that works. And a lot of times this is also beneficial to the single parent that might work in a different district. We have these invisible district lines all around the state,
right,
but might work in a different district, and it just really works out nicely that they can spend more time with their child. The child goes with them to work and comes home with them.
How close to reality is this at this point? What are the hurdles for this to become actionable?
Education in general is like this ocean liner that likes to go straight. It's the rudder is kind of creaky. It doesn't like to turn. So it's going to take some discussion. But the great thing about where we are on this is that 19 other states have implemented it. They've amended it. They've confronted the difficulties and worked it out. So we have a lot of great examples to bring it here. The bottom line here is not really about the dollars or the invisible district boundaries and all of that. It's how do we ramp up achievement in a time of specialized education that every child can get an education that matches up with their needs. You know, some children do better in a smaller school than a larger school based on personality. And parents ultimately need to be able to make that decision. And we want to give them choice.
You have been surprised by the interest in this, haven't you?
It has been a shock to me. This is, you know, Indiana, for instance, that has this available. Affects about 4% of the students statewide. You know, it's a small number, but for those students, it's important. But it has received a lot of talk just in the last week.
All right, the Secretary of Education and Workforce Development in Kentucky is with us today, Hal Heiner. I want to come back a minute. I want to ask you about the dual credit, drill down on that just a little bit, and also what are the jobs of the future and how is Kentucky getting folks ready for those jobs? We're back on Kentucky Newsmakers in just a moment.